Welcome to my show. A guest here. Her name is Emma Redfern. Mrs. Emma, how are you doing, ma?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Mrs. Emma. And also, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity. Firstly, you are an author. You are also a consultant and physiotherapy professional. Can you please, Mrs. Emma, discuss more about yourself and how you are doing currently now, Mrs. Emma?
Internal family systems, and I work with a few clients, but mostly I work with other professionals and help support their practices. And I also author and edit IFS books.
Very much beautiful. And also, in regards to the experience you've had, Mrs. Emma, and also the insights as a consultant and also a physiotherapy as well, you've decided to include a book as well, which is The Internal Family. Can you please, Mrs. Emma, discuss more on the book? And do you also plan to write more books in the coming future, Mrs. Emma?
The book is called Internal Family Systems, Making a Start and Getting Curious. And it's published by a health and wellbeing publisher called Sheldon Press. They're based in England, but you can also get the book around the world. Um, And no, this is probably my last written book because I'm getting on now and it takes a lot out of me. But I enjoy writing, and this is the most accessible book I've written or authored, edited, and it's for general readers who maybe haven't come across IFS before.
Very much beautiful, and I am very much glad that people are able to actually access the book anywhere around the world because this is a very technical topic regarding the family system, which is barely spoken in our time today. And that is why I'll drive to someone who is completely new to the internal family system. Why can the concept of parts feel so freeing once they begin to understand what the internal family system is, Mrs. Emma?
I think it's because it makes sense of people's experience, because we often do feel conflicted, or we do one thing and then we do the opposite, and then we do the first thing again, and then we can't keep a straight focus sometimes. And when we understand that's because it's different parts of us, that feels somehow easier in terms of self-acceptance than just thinking, oh, well, I failed to keep going to the gym every day. It's not that you failed, it's just that a part wants to do that, but another part, don't want to. So, yeah, I think it helps with self-acceptance.
Exactly. When it comes to this little ideas, when it comes to the IFS, which is the internal family system, it has more ingredients when it comes to people to also gain more insight and also gain more exploration and understanding as well. And that is why I would like to drive to one of the most powerful ideas in the internal family system is that even our most difficult parts are also trying to protect us in some way. How does that shift the way we approach anxiety, hunger, avoidance, or inner criticism, Mrs. Emma?
Yes, and I think that also goes back to the freedom thing. Society in general has us battling with ourselves. You know, you have to overcome the inner critic, or you have to fight back your anger. Um, and IFS is very non-pathologizing. So it's about befriending a part that might show up angry, or befriending a part that has the job of criticizing, because often those parts are protecting wounded parts that they're frightened will overtake the family, the whole system, and then we won't be able to function. So they're trying to maybe help us function. They're protecting something that they fear even more, like anxiety, for example, might be protecting somebody from feeling overwhelming grief, or anger, a part that's showing up angry might indicate that there's a part who's full of fear. So if we can begin to directly get to know these parts and ask them, how are you trying to help? And is it working? And sometimes they don't know it's not working. And also we can help go to the parts that they're protecting and help them as well, which relieves pressure off the different levels in the system.
All right, Mrs. Emma, I sincerely appreciate you for the wonderful insight, the profound insight in regards to we understanding ourselves as well, because our emotions plays a very huge role in how we react, how we take things. As we, as even families, we have different personalities, and for us to actually push back on some certain areas, it could be due to some areas in our life which needs to be dealt with. And I sincerely appreciate the areas that we can also use in those perspectives that can actually deal with the main thing that is causing those shield. Probably it could be anxiety, hunger, it could be criticism or avoidance as well. And also, your book is
Mm-hmm.
also both approachable and also practical because you brought in more practical approaches in the perspective as well. What do you think are also some of the core internal family system concepts that listeners need to try to understand first in order to begin exploring their inner world? Mrs. Emma.
One of the core concepts is that we're more than just our parts. Our parts are the things that show up in life in general. You will have technical parts that help you do your podcast, for example. I've got parts that like to study and like to read and like to write and so on. But as well as the parts, there's an inner core um, presence called self with a capital S. And that's a core concept because self is like an inner family leader or head of a family or resource that can help parts, whether that's for healing or so they don't feel so alone, or help negotiate with them so they can shift something. So that's a core concept. And another thing that I've alluded to is that there are no bad parts. Um, all parts are valuable, they all have a place, and they aren't the burdens, but some parts carry burdens. They are wounded, and those burdens can be let go of, and those wounds can be healed. Um, And sometimes parts get confused and think they are the problem, but actually they've experienced things that might make them feel bad, or they've experienced things that make them extreme. So that's a couple of things.
Completely agree with you, Mrs. Emma. As we, as different beings, we do have our own paths. Despite I, as a podcast host, despite someone who loves to do certain things, some people love to sing music. That is our path. And despite how those paths are, it definitely has a story. It definitely has a wound. It could definitely have something that also drive that path to continue to make it also evolve as well. So I sincerely appreciate you
Mhm.
for that perspective, for people to understand better that despite our part is, there is no area that could be bad. Ours is to sit down and also give the sense of involvement when it comes to that part and also make us to understand it better and also see how we can use it as a tool for exploration. Despite the pain, the anxiety that could follow it, we could definitely look for solutions in regards to some perspective that could help as well. And I would also like to drive
Mhm.
to the point of the traditional ways of thinking, Mrs. Emma. How do you also think, or how does the internal family system, how do you think it also differ from more traditional ways of thinking about therapy and emotional healing, Mrs. Emma?
Yes. So one of the metaphors I use in the book is the idea of the inner psychic bus. And there's a busload of parts, like the family's off on a journey, and somebody wants to go over there, and somebody wants to go over there, and somebody wants to speed, and then somebody's snoring at the back, um, and if in traditional therapy there's the client, that's going to miss a lot of potential rather than thinking, well, the client is multiple, so who, like separating out who, I'm not explaining myself very well, but it's like, for say coming to therapy, who's come to therapy? There'll be a part that wants to have some therapy, and then there might be other parts like, no, I really don't want to go. No, it's a waste of money. I don't want to. We've tried it before and it didn't work. And there'll be a conflict. And it's like, it's important for me to think when somebody comes to see me, well, who is it's coming? Which part is coming? And are there any other parts that have got something else to say? Making them all welcome because they're going to have an impact, even if we know about them or not. So why not make it more, their impact more available and welcome them more? And then we can have different kind of conversations. Um, okay, so one of the traditional kind of ways of thinking is that the client goes to see the therapist and the client somehow tells the therapist everything and as if somehow that helps. And sometimes it does brilliantly. But if the therapist is overwhelmed and they're doing therapy from their parts, it might not be as effective as if they're doing it from their self energy, their curious presence, their compassion. And also in IFS, the therapist makes a relationship with the client like you would in talking therapy, but we also share the journey with the client's internal self. So there's the self of the therapist and the self of the client with their internal family members. So to me, that's an extra layer of self energy, that's an extra layer of benefit. And also the healing work happens inside as well as in between the two people. And that's something maybe that other therapies don't acknowledge or don't understand, maybe.
Completely agree with you. Some therapies, they have their different way of actually getting to know their client and also trying to get to understand them better and also create that sense of connection that can make them understand the real issue and also how to get it resolved as well. But despite how a therapist or how a client wants to get the approach in regards to actually giving the sense of healing and also giving more understanding as well, you've made the perspective that it depends on how the therapist, it could be the ones that actually develop this relationship. It could also be the one that actually takes time or actually give its own understanding on how it actually get the solution done. And it also depends on the strength of the therapist as well. How stronger or how weak he or she is as well. There are a lot of features. And that is why one of the most important thing that we also need to discuss about in regards to the internal family system is the possible misconception, Mrs. Emma. So your book also includes practices, as we said earlier, methods, and also troubleshooting guidance. And you've made one of the most important insights that the inner is one of the most important healing that we do need to actually work on. So, what do you think are some of the some common misunderstanding or obstacles people face when they first begin working with their inner part, Mrs. Emma?
Yes. Um, well, sometimes when somebody reads a therapy book, like maybe they read this IFS therapy book that's just I've just written, and it's their parts reading it, and their parts are all excited and eager, and oh yes, let's fix that part over there that's doing this problematic thing. And so they want to do the IFS themselves. And they kind of maybe forget that it's the self of their system that needs to do the deep inner work and that they've got that self resource to meet rather than have to try and do self's job. So that's a common misconception that, is understandable. Um, and I think another common misconception is when somebody's had like talking therapy, they think IFS is just another version of that. And parts who maybe like to figure things out or who like to share a lot of content um, take up a lot of that driving time on the inner psychic bus, and they don't let the system stop and do a U-turn and go inside and start meeting self or letting self be there to do any healing work. So that's a bit of a thing that sometimes needs to be overcome along the journey.
Completely agree, and I sincerely appreciate you. And we also need to understand that there are different type of therapies. Like we are actually listening to the internal system family now. There are hundreds of it. There are live. There are a lot of it. So it does differ, and for us to actually give exploration to something new and something that is really seen as well, it also adds its own qualities. It also adds its own ways of getting issue resolved. I think people have to understand that better. We can't just use a personal perspective or a side of therapy to conclude on every single one that are actually having different rules as well. And also, Mrs. Hema, I would also like to drive to your experience. I know you drive more in our inner world, our inner self, but in your experience, how do you think learning to relate differently to our inner world? How do you think it's transformed not just the mental health, but relationships, the relationship we have with our friends and family, self trust, and also our daily life as well, Mrs. Emma?
Well, going on this bus metaphor, buses need oil to function smoothly. And appreciation is a great oil for the inner system. And self appreciation brings a whole new perspective. So instead of this parts battling each other or society telling me I've got to get rid of that one and stop listening to that one, it's like, no, let's just bathe in some appreciation inside. And that can feel really, really different to some people and really powerful and quite transformative. So there's that. This idea that I've got multiple parts and everybody's human and parts mess up sometimes. I might say something harsh. A part of me might say something harsh to my husband, and I can feel bad about that. And it might help feel compassion for that part if I know it's just a part. It's not all of me. There's another part that loves him dearly, and I can see in him that when he says something to me that I don't find appreciative, it's a part of him that may be very young or maybe very stressed. So it helps compassion flow. Um, and another curious thing about the practice, if I do my work unburdening, and particularly unburdening legacies that maybe other family members have had and they've passed down in some way, that can help them. So the inner work I do in my system has an outer ripple effect on other people in my environment, in my family system out there, or with the people I work with. And it's very noticeable, but hard to explain. And a lot of this with internal family systems is quite hard to explain, and it only begins to make sense once you experience some of it.
Exactly, because it's something that also make people see us differently. When we work on our inner self, the relationship we have with people, the people we surround ourselves with, they see us differently, and they see us more attractive, they see us more engaging, they see us to be around with, because our inner self is cherished, is nurtured. It shows that sense of
Mm.
outwardness, because our outwardness is great, but the inner one is going to bring how we actually bring out this relationship and also build a sense of communication as well. So it plays a very vital role,
Mm-hmm.
and I sincerely appreciate you for the great insight. And that is why I want you to actually bring out a very important message in regards to the internal family system as well. For listeners who have always felt conflicted within themselves and are
Mhm.
longing for deeper healing, what do you think is the most important message you hope they can take away from this introduction in regards to the internal family system, Mrs. Emma?
Mm. It's normal to feel conflicted. So, any listeners who have inner conflicts or inner critics that sound very loud at times, or they go from one decision to another decision, or they can't follow through, or whatever it is they feel bad about, that's normal and understandable. And there's hope because once we get to know our parts, things can change. Um, and knowing that they've got positive intentions and they're working hard and they're not trying to cause a problem, they're trying to cause the opposite often. Yeah, so I think that's probably a big takeaway, and that healing is possible, and that everybody, however much they've been through, has a self, this inner wise, compassionate presence who's loving and curious. Everybody has one, but it's the parts that kind of block access to that. Um, and I know some people get discouraged if they don't instantly find self, but a takeaway from now is that give it time, slow things down. It's possible to find it. If not in a therapy room, often out in the world, when you last felt compassion for a little child or you felt awe at a sunset, that's accessing this inner healing presence.
I sincerely appreciate you for the wonderful and also the great insight. You made us understand that despite how we could have different paths, we could react differently. We could react in a way we never even believed that we actually need to react. We could get conflicted, have a lot of challenges, difficulties as well. But despite everything, we always need to come back to ourselves, give ourselves the sense of reflection and also understand ourselves in regards to the internal family system, which is also created to give that sense of enlightenment, to give that sense of hope, to give that sense of also understanding as well, for us to also be in a position to live a lot more fulfilled life, to live a more life that as a more deeper healing and also a life that is also more hopeful as well. And I sincerely appreciate you for the great insight, Mrs. Emma. And also, Mrs. Emma, there is a question I normally ask during the end of the show. From our forefathers, from our ancestors, there are a lot of beautiful things that do exist during our forefathers' time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, Mrs. Emma, what do you think that thing will be, Mrs. Emma?
Well, what instantly came to mind, was connection. This world feels very fragmented and fractured sometimes. And I think that's one of the reasons I love this concept of the inner family, because that's a connected thing. And I think our ancestors, before internet, before TV, will have known more deeply about connection between people, connection to the land. And even if they didn't know about connection inside, connection would have been in a more available maybe somehow.
Completely agree, Mrs. Emma. To be honest with you, our world today is more globalized, it has more technology. We have the beauty of the artificial intelligence as well. It is so much beautiful. It's bringing us more together. But I think it also gives us the sense of not getting to know who we really are as a person. And our inner self is one of the most important things for us to actually have a life that will feel happier and also be in the position to also understand ourselves as well. So working on our inner world is like another family, as you said, and also having a genuine connection with people plays a very huge role in our emotional health, in our physical health, and in also every single thing that we do in life as well. And Mrs. Emma, I want to use this opportunity to thank you for the time, the book that you also brought out that gave more explanation and also more exploration in regards to another perspective that is really seen, really heard as well. Thank you so much, Mrs. Emma.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Emma. Have a wonderful day, Mrs. Emma. Bye bye.